you've got this situation with the House settlement where Claudia Wilken, who's the judge in that case, essentially looked at the settlement, and for those who don't know or aren't familiar with the terms, the settlement essentially did a few really important things. First thing that it did was it said, we're going to pay athletes that were in the NCAA from like 2015 until 2021, essentially back pay in repair for the lack of NIL money that they experienced during that time period. And then for athletes moving forward, the idea was, all right, we're going to establish a fund like a budget carve out of up to $21 million that colleges and universities and their athletic departments would pay athletes directly. And then that could be supplemented by outside NIL payments, but all of those would have to go through a clearinghouse of sorts to evaluate the deals to make sure that they were in concert with fair market value, whatever that means in this case. And it also essentially allowed the NCAA to create roster limits on sports. So instead of having walk-ons, you could have a larger number of scholarships, but you'd have to give full scholarships, and the numbers would go up to a certain level. But it meant that a large number of athletes would not be allowed to continue as college athletes. There would have to be roster cuts based upon these new numbers. I'm purposely kind of trying to keep this as simple as possible. Well, a lot of those athletes and their representatives essentially protested the settlement, saying, well, no, that's not fair and that's not right. And the judge essentially agreed. Like, she asked the NCAA and its member institutions, like, please do something about this. Have some kind of a tapering in place so that you don't just have a bunch of athletes who are no longer eligible to play simply because you've arbitrarily set down that X, Y, and Z has to happen by this date. And the NCAA and its member institutions, as they are wont to do, said, nah, we're good. We've already decided this is the best way to do things, and we're not going to listen to you. So the judge said, I'm not approving the settlement, and I'm going to give you some time to try to figure this out. And if you don't, I might not approve the settlement at all. And so that's where we're at. Now, it does feel like the colleges and universities might finally take this judge's advice and do what she's asking. This is not too different from how we got to our NIL situation in the first place. The NCAA and its member institutions have just never gotten their heads wrapped around the idea that they can't simply dictate terms